Good show tonight, folks. Good show tonight. Very good show. Just give me a minute. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Patriot Nation TV. I'm your host, Tim Davis, a.k.a. Professor X, your new age patriot with the 1776 attitude. Just one man, one opinion, trying to connect the dots, making sense of it all in this bizarro world. It is December 22nd, 2021, and tonight I will be discussing the forgotten oath of Congress and public officials. They forgot their oaths. The culture war that we're facing today, is it relevant, or is it comparable to the American Revolution during 1775 and 76? Also, is it comparable to the Civil War of 1860 to 61? So we're going to dive into, also I'm going to talk about how liberals and conservatives cannot coexist. They never could, actually. So basically, I'm going to discuss how the American Civil War was a cultural war. The American Revolution was a cultural war. Today in 2021, the cultural Marxists are waging a cultural war almost today. So we're going to dive into those three topics and try to come to resolutions on how we can stop the coming cultural war. Is it inevitable? Could be. I don't know. We can also look at the 28 charges that are in our Declaration of Independence. Oh, let me get this out here. I'm going to use this little one. So I use this as a reference when I pull up what I want to. We'll talk about the 28 charges. I'll pull a couple out, compare them to today, and give you exactly how they did it. And it's 28 charges. If you read every single one of them, it's exactly what it is, what we got today. So it is what it is. Hey, hello, Mexico life. How's everything going? Good to see you. Glad you tuned in. Appreciate it. Appreciate the support. So I'm sure I hope you caught the opening. Should be pretty good. And, that's basically what it is. So that's what we're going to discuss. So let me start off by saying thank you for tuning in. And if you're tuning in for your first time and you're new to the show or the channel, please hit like and subscribe. Hit the little notification bell, ding, ding, ding. So you get, so you'll be updated and notified on future broadcasts. Unfortunately, I'm still being shadow banned. Free speech, Can't have that. Guy with 450, 500 subscribers, shadow banning it. That's scary. Scary. So, all right, so let's get to it. And we're going to get to it. Let's just get to it right now. The next election session, or the next election cycle, or the next election season, will roll around before we even know it. 2022, November. What we got to do is, instead of first asking politicians what they'll do about jobs or student debt or our failing schools, or worst of all, what they'll do for us, let's ask them the question: how do you propose to defend the Constitution of the United States? Got to keep your eyes on the ball, folks. You got to keep your eyes on the ball. I see I got another Ralphiello Weston. This is a troll. Nobody, please do not hit it. Some kind of pervert putting on something on there. Don't hit it. Don't look at his thing. He will be removed soon. I got to work on that now. It's another distraction. So anyway, we discuss things. So let's start off by saying this. The forgotten oath of Congress. The forgotten oath of Congress. According to my online dictionary, or the dictionary I got behind me, right here, the dictionary behind me. But I'm going to use the online dictionary because that's what everybody can use. It's a little different than what I got. Obviously, with time, meanings and words change, just like leaders, but the ideology never does. So according to the dictionary, an oath is a solemn promise, often invoking a divine witness, meaning God, like separation of church. Anyway, often invoking a divine witness regarding one's future actions or behavior. Oaths play a big role in our society. We see it in the Boy Scouts, known today as Scouts BSA, since admitting girls to the organization. Liberal buffoonery. Begin their weekly meetings by raising their right hand in the Scout sign and reciting the Boy Scouts oath. Saying the Pledge of Allegiance every day in school, right? I believe they still do it. Maybe not in New Yorkistan, but I'm sure in God's country, the South and the Midwest, they do. A bride and groom typically exchange vows with each other during their weddings. It's an oath. To receive security clearance, certain members of our government must sign an oath stating they will never divulge secrets or restricted information to others. That's what they say, right? But we know it's not happening. We see it. And then there's our Congress. Actually, our military, our police, they all take oaths to defend the Constitution. Anyway, then there's our Congress. They take an oath. They take the following oath. Yet, given recent actions, one has to wonder how seriously they take the solemn promise. So this is the oath of being a Congress or a senator. I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same. That I take the obligation freely, without any mental reservations or purpose of evasion. And I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office of which I am about to enter. So help me God. That's the oath Congress takes. Online, the United States Senate gives a brief history of this solemn oath, explaining that while it can be traced to the early days of the Republic, the current oath is a product of the 1860s, drafted by the Civil War era members of Congress, intent on ensnaring traitors. Federal employees, judges, and incoming vice presidents take the same oath. This came out of the Civil War, right? The president of the United States also takes an oath, prescribed by Article 2, Section 1 of the Constitution. Right here, folks. So I'm going to recite it. Likewise, all United States military personnel take an oath when they enlist or re-enlist. So do law enforcement. This is their oath. First, let me go by the President's oath according to Article Section 1 of the Constitution. I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will faithfully execute the office of the President of the United States and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, defend the Constitution of the United States. So as I was saying, that's the President's oath. Like I was saying, the United States military and law enforcement take an oath too. This is their oath. I, their name, do solemnly swear to affirm that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same. That I will obey the orders of the President of the United States and the orders of officers appointed over me according to the regulations and the Uniform Code of military justice. So help me God. So this brings me to states like Virginia and California, New Yorkistan, California. I think I mentioned that. Our governors take similar oaths, promising to support or defend the United States Constitution, as well as the Constitution of their particular state. Almost all the state governors do this. All these oaths share one commonality: the defense of the Constitution of the United States of America. So now, let me say this. I have known members of the military who hold their oath, military and law enforcement. I know them personally, who hold their oath in high regard as the heart of their service to this country. I also once knew a federal civil servant, now long deceased, decade or so. Got a lot of information from him, and for whom his oath was the true north on the compass of how to perform his job. He was an interrogator, military, Vietnam vet, yada, yada, yada. Though I am certain many of our elected officials, it's tough to say this, but it is. I got a hope, right? Though I am certain that our elected officials and judges take their pledges just as seriously as our present circumstances. Present circumstances leave me wondering about those who either ignore their duty to defend the Constitution or seem intent on evading the document altogether. Just avoid it. From some of our judges to members of Congress, Republicans and Democrats alike, and from some of our governors to the upper level federal officials, FBI, ATF, yada, yada, yada. Yeah, I'm going to get flagged for this. Absolutely. I don't have my dartboard. So I got the bullseye on my back. I don't care. Like I said, from some of our judges, members of Congress, Republicans and Democrats alike, and from some of our governors, upper level officials, federal officials. It's more federal. We find many have failed to protect our Constitution and our liberties. Yes, Mexico for life. We do hold this oath to the day we die. However, for example, do you take such an oath, yet work with groups who want to radically transform the government of the United States? I don't know. How do you reconcile your oath with sitting on your hands in Congress and keeping silent because you're afraid to offend people or losing your next election? How do you do it? How do you support and defend the Constitution by staying mum while others, Democrats and Republicans alike, are abusing their power? Having taken this oath, how can you then watch without protest as your colleagues cut deals with foreign powers, NATO, UN, or abet them in our government, Taliban, whatever you want to, whatever. Just think about it. Look at the last 20 years. I'm 50, so I'll say the last 30 years. Just look at it. Here's a thought. Like I said, the next election's coming up soon. So here's a thought. The next election season will roll around before we know it. Various candidates will hold town meetings, meet with voters at rallies, and give interviews on both local and national television. We'll see it. But it's the same thing that was said 60 years ago. Yeah, I'm going to say 60 years ago. And on national television. So I'm at the point where Americans, instead of asking them what they'll do about our jobs, economy, taxes, or student death, or our failing schools, or worst of all, what they'll do for us, we the people, let's ask them this question. How do you propose to defend the Constitution of the United States? It's simple. Or better yet, what are the duties enumerated in the Constitution regarding your office? Just think, people. Let's be more witty than these people. If the candidates are running for Congress, we might then ask if they know the first two amendments. Just the first two. Forget the 10, the first two in the Bill of Rights. And how they propose to defend those rights. Let's see what they say. This is the oath that a lot of our public officials, law enforcement, military, are just ignoring. And we the people are just keeping our eyes off the ball instead of on the ball, falling for the buffoonery that's going on. Dovic 91, variants, whatever you want to call it. Bottom line is this. If we don't start electing Americans that see the U.S. Constitution as a roadmap instead of an obstacle, we will find ourselves right back where we started 250 plus years ago. It's a fact. History repeats itself. Now, being that I'm saying that, this brings me to the next topic, the American Revolution. Contrary to popular belief, sure, taxation, representation, taxes, Boston Tea Party, we all learned it. We learned it in elementary school. I learned it 40 years ago. I'm 50, so I learned it when I was like 10, fourth grade. We all did. That's why they teach us when we're 10, not when we're 30 or 20 and 19 in college. So I'm going to say it like this. The Marxist cultural war that's being waged today, it's the same that was waged 250 years ago or 170 years ago. The American Revolution was a cultural war. Yes, a cultural war. 247 years ago this month in December, a group of American opponents of the Crown's tax policy known disguises set about methodically destroying a shipment of tea imported into Boston by the East India Company. The Vandals, as they would say, trespassed on privately owned ships in Boston Harbor and threw tea into the ocean. These protesters were thorough, not content with having destroyed most of the company's imported tea that night. As we would call them today, the activists. The activists later discovered another tea shipment, which had been unloaded at a warehouse in Boston. The activists then broke to the warehouse to destroy the tea. Total damages amounted to approximately $1.67 million in today's money. So I'm going to take 200 years ago and use today's language, because unfortunately people judge the past by 2020 eyes. So I'm going to use exactly what they're doing 20 years ago with 2020 eyes and use the verbiage that they use today. This was the work of so this is called the Boston Tea Party. You all learned it. I learned it. You learned it. We learned it in 5th grade, 4th grade, whatever it was. This was the work of the Sons of Liberty. Yes, the Sons of Liberty. Some call them terrorists. Some call them whatever you want to call them. Slave or whatever. I'm not going to get into all that buffoonery. I've done many videos on that. But we know what it's about. True patriots know. True historians know. And so on and so on. So this was the work of the Sons of Liberty, the Boston Tea Party, a group led in part by Samuel Adams, whose brother happened to be the second president of the United States, and which would become known as the acts of resistance, arson, and violence committed against tax collectors. Today, we would call them IRS agents or other agents of the crown. IRS agents, FBI. I really wish I had my dart. Really wish I had my door barred. I got my darts though. Got my darts right here. Put the bullseye on my back. One man, one opinion. Come after me. I don't care. I have nothing to lose. Can never touch my soul. So on and so on. Notably, however, as time went on, acts of resistance in America escalated. At first into widespread mob violence, and then into military action and guerrilla warfare. Why did many Americans engage in this behavior or support it? Ask yourself that. Why? The simplest answer has long been that the colonists were angry they were subjected to taxation without representation. This is the simplistic version of history, often taught in grade school, like I mentioned earlier. The reality, of course, is that the conflict between patriots and their former countrymen eventually became a deeply seated and violent culture war. Culture war. Yes, I'm going to say it. It's a culture war. It wasn't just about taxes. It wasn't. That's what they tell people, make them feel good. We were brainwashed, folks. We were brainwashed. It wasn't just about taxes. The taxation without representation argument endures, of course, because it is useful for the regimen and its backers. Advocates of the political status quo insist there is no need for anything like the Boston Tea Party today, because modern Americans enjoy representation in Congress. We are told that taxation and the regulatory state are all necessarily moral and legitimate because the voters are represented. It's the key word, representative. Even conservatives or neocons are not real conservatives. They're conservatives in name, or rhinos. Like I said, even make-believe neocons, who often claim to be for small government. Yeah, okay. You tell people that, but people are so brainwashed, they believe it. Small government, huh? Okay, small government. How do I okay, small government. Often oppose radical opposition to the regimen, such as secession, Confederates, 1860s. See how it's all over the place. It's all history repeating itself. On the grounds that political resistance movements are only acceptable when there is no political representation. So they brainwashed us. Now we have representation, right? So they can legally use tyranny or usurp power, NDAA Act, Patriot Act, so on and so on. The implication is that since the United States holds elections every now and then, every 2, 3, 4 years, 5 years, whatever, no political action outside of voting and maybe a little sign waving, hey, vote for me, hey, a little sign waving, flag, hey, vote for me, is allowed. It's unlikely the Sons of Liberty the original Sons of Liberty, would have bought this argument. Just like I don't buy this argument. I really don't. I really don't buy this argument. But just like the Sons of Liberty, they wouldn't have bought this argument. The small number of millionaires and billionaires who meet in Washington, D.C. nowadays in 2021 are hardly representative of the American public back home. They're all lawyers anyway, professional trained liars. The 1770s equivalent would have consisted of throwing the American a few bones in the form of a handful of votes in Parliament, with seats to be reliably held by a few wealthy colonists, far beyond the reach or influence of the average member of the Sons of Liberty. You and me, patriots. You and me, the patriots. But attempts to frame the revolution as a conflict over taxes largely misses the point. Political representation was not the real issue. It really wasn't. We know this because when the 1778 Carly Peace Commission offered representation in Parliament to the Continental Congress as part of the negotiated conclusion of the war, the offer was rejected by the statists, the Tories, the Loyalists, King George, the Parliament, etc., etc., etc. The revolution was partly a cultural war. It was taxation without representation, sure, but it was a cultural war, just like the Civil War is a cultural war. And today, a cultural war exists. That's what I want our guns. That's what I want our Second Amendment. So the revolution was partly a cultural war. By the late 1770s, the fervor behind the revolution had already gone far beyond mere complaints about taxation. This was just one issue among many. Like I said, many. Let me hold on a second, folks. Declaration of Independence. Right, Declaration of Independence. There was 28 grievances. 28 grievances. If you actually read it, all 28 are relevant today. It's the same exact thing, but we're beyond that. So it was already beyond mere complaints about taxation. People actually want to be taxed. They think it's a great thing to be, oh, tax me. Yeah, built the roads. Taxation's theft, never forget that. This is just one issue among many. Rather, the revolution quickly became a cultural war. Yes, a cultural war. Today we would call them conservatives versus liberals. Back then they were Tories and loyalists and yada yada. Just nothing. The ideology never changes. Just names and faces and nations. Same evil plot though. So it definitely turned and became a cultural war in which South-styled Americans were taking up arms against a foreign, immoral, and corrupt oppressor. What we have today. Mere offers of representation were hardly sufficient at this point, and it's unlikely any such offers were going to be enough after the events of 1775, the Boston Tea Party. When the British finally marched into Massachusetts and opened fire on the American militiamen, and the first casualty of that war was black man. Maybe I'll do a show on the Black American heroes that participated and helped win this war of revolution, and it made America what it is today. So like I was saying, when the British finally marched into Massachusetts and opened fire on American militiamen, after that, the war had become, I'm going to use economist Murray Rothbard's term, a war of national liberation. That's how he described the revolution. This ideological and psychological divide perhaps explains the ferocity with which the American revolutionaries resisted British rule. like we should resist today. Now, according to today's historians and a woke crowd, cancel culture, the patriots initiated real violence against innocents. And why they do it? We'll dive into it a little bit. For example, when we consider the many other protest actions by the Sons of Liberty in the lead up to the revolution, many of them could easily be described as acts of non-defiance, violence, intimidation, and destruction. Many tax collectors resigned from their offices in fear. Others, including citizens merely suspected of supporting the British, were tarred and feathered by protesters. Tarred and feathered. Bring that back. Known loyalists were routinely threatened with physical harm. Now they call it Insurrection Act, January 6th. Yeah, think about it, folks. Just think about it. To themselves, their families, and their property. Many loyalists fled the colonies in fear for their lives. And after the closure of the Boston Harbor, many fled to inner Boston seeking protection from the mobs. Loyalist homes were burned and theft committed by members of the Sons of Liberty was routine. Hundreds of pounds were stolen of Governor Hutchinson's private home after it was ransacked by a mob of poor and working class Bostonians. They call them domestic terrorists, like they call them today. But they haven't invaded governor's mansions yet. Caught up in all of this, it should be remembered were children and spouses of the guilty parties, who in many cases were just low-level bureaucrats. Low-level bureaucrats. So this is the Northern Theater. So this is going to bring me to the Southern Theater. In the Southern Theater of War, for example, the British Army armed loyalist militias who engaged in a scorched earth campaign against their rebels, or the patriots, domestic terrorists, whatever you want to call them. They burned private homes to the ground. They cut up and murdered pregnant women, displayed the severed heads of their victims, and employed other tactics of terrorism. Today we call them private contractors. Back then they were mercenaries. But they were all funded by the government or the crown, the monarch of King George. The rebels responded in kind, attacking many. That's what we would call asymmetric warfare. So if the cops and military decided to come take our guns, roll the streets, good for you. You're obeying orders like the Nazis did. Remember, though, while you're doing that, who's going to protect your wife and kids? I'm just saying, comparing history to history. I'm not using my opinion. I'm just using history. So the rebels responded in kind, attacking many who had no role in the attacks on patriot homes, including women, and torturing suspect Tories with beloved torture methods such as spigonotting, in which the victims spun around and around an upward pointed nail until they were impaled. That's what the British did. Now we call it waterboarding. It's waterboard yet. Indefinite detention center, NDAA Act. This sort of thing cannot be explained by mere disagreement over taxation. You don't do it over taxation. Just like you don't do what we're doing right now. Police state over taxation? Nah. Acts of violence like these represents a meaningful cultural and national divide. You see these liberal heathens, put the Congress members and their supporters on social media, put the Republicans, put the conservatives in concentration camps. You see it. So basically, how is this How big is this cultural divide in America? How big is it? How big is this divide in America? For now, the cultural divide in the United States of America today has it yet reached the proportions experienced during the Revolution, the Civil War, or for that matter, during the 1850s, like I said, and led up to the American Civil War? But if hostilities reach this point, there will be little use in discussion over the size of the tax burden. It's useless. That's smoke and mirrors. That's to keep your eyes off the ball. That's to keep your eyes off the ball. Like I said, if the disdain by each side, left, right, ultra right, for the other side will be far beyond mere compromises or arcane matters of policy. And just as discussions over taxation without representation back in the day missed the real currents underlying the American Rebellion, then 1775, 1861, 2022, maybe? I don't know. Any view of the current crisis that ignores the ongoing cultural war, because we are in a cultural war, will fail to identify the causes. They're blaming on racism, homophobic, whatever, Islamophobe, whatever, Islamophobe, whatever. Yet, little jingle bells for you, everybody. As I was saying, yet the culture war has also likely progressed to the point where national unity is unlikely to be salvaged. It is. Conservatives and liberals cannot coexist. Even by a charismatic leaders, cunning leaders, and current leaders, current teachers, current economists, whatever you want to say. It just ain't. It can't be salvaged. It can't be. We're too far gone, folks. I believe that. One man, one opinion. We're just too far gone in efforts at compromise. When it comes to culture, there's little room for compromise. It is increasingly apparent that only peaceful solutions lies in some of the radical decentralization. Decentralize everything, amounting to either succession, the South did, and self-rule at the local level with only foreign policy as a national policy, which our federal government and our Constitution originally was based upon. Now think about it. Think about this. Had the British offered these terms in 1770, bloodshed would have likely been avoided. Americans must pursue similar solutions now before it's too late. They have to. And this brings me to the Civil War. I'm going to end the show. I've been on for almost 40 minutes. Just think about this. The issue of slavery was a catalyst for a larger cultural divide that grew between the slave states and the free states during the mid-19th century. For many Northerners, slavery was just an example of the South's moral degeneracy. For Southerners, those who tolerate abolitionists, they would label them as atheists, communists, using today's terms, atheists, communists, and unpatriotic subversives of various types. The two sides began to see themselves as fundamentally incompatible, liberals, conservative, even beyond the slavery issue, today tax issue. Thus, the Southern diarists, Mary Chestnut, was not entirely wrong when she simplified the mounting hostilities to a matter of cultural divide. To a matter of cultural divide. Think about that. To a matter of cultural divide. We separated North from South. That's what we did. We separated North from South because of an incompatibility of temper. We are divorced because we have hated each other. So if we could only separate, a separation, as the French would say, was, I'm probably going to pronounce it wrong, oligarchy, as the French would have say it. I probably pronounce it wrong. I'm not French. And not have a horrid fight for divorce. After all, had the Northerners viewed the succession as merely a disagreement over taxes or over slavery, it's unlikely nearly as many Northerners would have flocked the U.S. Army in hopes of invading the South, burning down the Southern cities, raping and pillaging, and that's it. You know what I'm saying, folks? And that's why I'm trying to tell you, if we don't start electing Americans that see the U.S. Constitution as a roadmap instead of an obstacle, we will find ourselves right back where we were 20 or 50 years ago. So I've been on 43 minutes. So I'm going to sign out, folks. Hope you enjoyed the show. Please hit like, hit subscribe. And as usual, and as always, I will say, God bless you. God bless your family. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. And God bless America. I will talk to you guys soon. Peace.